everyone, my name is Michaela Kathleen, and in this video I am going to be talking about my October reading wrap-up. I read 3 books this month, plus a special one that I'll talk about at the end. But the first one I read was A Man Called Uwe by Frederick Bachmann. This was a reread. I read this maybe 2-ish years ago. I think just a little bit before I started my channel. This was a random one that I picked up on a whim at the library, at the exchange wall. Did not have any expectations going in the first time I read it, and it ended up being one of my favorite books, a 5-star read. So I've been super excited ever since reading it to reread it and read more Frederick Bachmann. So last year, with some Christmas gift cards, I picked up Beartown by Frederick Bachmann. And now this year I finally got around to reading A Man Called Uwe again, and then Beartown. But yeah, as I said, this has become one of my favorite books based on just my first read of it. 5 stars for sure. Bachmann is just so good at crafting character. It's truly amazing. I love Uwe so much. He's this curmudgeonly old man, but underneath he's secretly got a heart of gold. And some people might not really love Uwe. As I said, he's quite curmudgeonly. He's got some judgments about people, I think partly based on his age. But the thing is, even though he kind of judges people based on things that he really shouldn't, in the end, he doesn't actually let that affect how he treats people, which I think is really what counts. And he always does the right thing no matter what. It's a funny, heartwarming, sad book, very sad. There's a very cute cat in the book, and yes, I just love it so much. Much like Me Before You, which I read last month, this book centers a character who does not want to be alive anymore. So kind of interesting to read 2 books about that back to back, and those characters come to different conclusions, and so it was interesting to read both of their journeys back to back, kind of coincidentally. I love following Uwe's journey through that. I will say this is definitely a slow read and at times slightly repetitive, so that might not be everybody's cup of tea, but I still really enjoyed the story because it's just so heartwarming. So yes, a 5-star read, highly recommend, in my top 20 favorite books. So then after that I picked up Beartown, my second Frederick Bachmann read, which I will note, when I went to the bookstore with my gift cards last year, I was determined that I would get a Frederick Bachmann book, but Beartown was not at the top of that list. It was pretty much at the bottom of that list. The one I wanted the most was Britt Marie Was Here, because it sounded somewhat similar to A Man Called Uwe. After that, I probably would have gone for My Grandmother Told Me to Tell You She's Sorry. And yeah, Beartown just was not at the top of the list because I knew that it was a book about hockey. I knew that it was about an entire town, not so much focusing on just one character. And so I had wanted to kind of stick with something a little bit closer to Uwe than this. And yeah, I ended up having very mixed feelings about this book. Kind of difficult to review just because, like, the writing again is so good. Even more so, Bachmann shows off his talent for building characters. Like, he can tell you everything you need to know about a character in a single page, and yet the character is still so deep, so complicated, so human. Certainly not flat characters at all, even though he can tell you everything about them in one page. So just really impressive writing. Definitely, like, the writing itself is 5 stars. Like, this is a 5-star quality book. But my personal enjoyment of the book was more like 3 stars. It took me a really long time to get into it, and then even when I did, I wasn't like super into it. I just was more into it than for the whole first half of the book. It kind of reminded me of Bridge of Clay by Markus Zusak, which I really hate that book. Just in like the pacing, it's pretty slow. And then it also kind of reminded me of The Casual Vacancy by J.K. Rowling, just in it being about this town and the culture of the town and following all these different characters, and it all being like very real and like dealing with a lot of heavy topics. And at the beginning of the book, it's kind of really trying to convince you to give a shit about hockey, which I just don't. This is a small town that is slowly, like, disintegrating. There are not a lot of jobs there, just not a lot of money coming into the town, and if they win, like, the big hockey game at the end of the season, then people will invest in the hockey, they'll get a new stadium, they'll get more tourism. It could potentially save the entire town if this one hockey game goes their way. Which I get it on an intellectual level. I do. But also, I just don't give a shit about hockey. And I just hate the culture of treating sports or anything else as more important than human life. Which the book makes that point. The book is not saying, hey, let's treat hockey more important than human life. The book is saying the opposite of that. It's saying, here's a culture and here's the problems with it. But also just reading about the people who do care more about hockey annoys me. And this is not directed specifically at hockey. I pretty much dislike all sports when it's at the level of treating it like religion or something, which also annoys me when it's treated more important than human life. So, like, it was a lot of interesting issues to explore, and they were explored so well, and so with such nuance, and so, like, I appreciated it, and I agreed with all the messages, but at the same time, just reading about it was also very annoying and frustrating. So again, a very complicated reaction from me on this book. Oh, it also gave me 13 Reasons Why vibes, although I'm going to guess that it handles the topics that made me associate it with 13 Reasons Why a lot better than that book probably did. But yeah, like I said, a lot of characters to follow here, all of them incredibly complex and interesting. A lot of them are very likable, a lot of them are very unlikable. For pretty much every, like, frustrating character, there's also a character that will kind of put them in their place at some point and make you go, yes! I hate this character, I'm glad. But yeah, mixed feelings on this one. It certainly is one that I thought a lot about while I was reading it, but outside of the time when I was actually actively reading it. This is a trilogy. The first two are out. I think the third one is supposed to be coming sometime soon, which is another reason I did not want to buy Beartown last year when I had that gift card, was because I knew it was a series and I really just wanted a standalone. And so now I'm left trying to decide if I want to continue with the series or not. I think maybe when the third one comes out, I'll go ahead and get the second one and read that. Because like I said, it was all very interesting, so well written, but just my personal enjoyment was more like 3 stars. So it leaves me on the fence about it. I'll probably continue with it. I find it very difficult to discontinue series. But yeah, so that was my kind of mixed review of Beartown. Please let me know down below if you've read the sequel and if you think it's worth reading, although no spoilers, please. And now on to the third book I read this month, which was Again But Better by Christine Riccio, which this was my first ever YouTuber book, booktuber book, so that did have me worried. And I will say, while it was pretty relatable, the writing did also feel a little bit immature. It was definitely heavily based on herself and her own experiences, which I think is fairly common for a debut novel, or the first novel you write but doesn't get published, and the second or third or fourth novel you write ends up being the one that gets published. Which, at the beginning, I will say, the kind of self-reference stuff is actually kind of what made the book feel more relatable. The author's note at the beginning I thought was so cute and so nice, how she says, you know, this was inspired by my experiences. I was very shy and I kind of learned to overcome it. I hope this inspires you. I thought that was very cute. And it also made me anticipate that it would be very relatable for me in the way that Fangirl was by Rainbow Rowell. Kath is basically me, Kath from Fangirl, and so I was looking forward to this character having similar feels to that, although I didn't expect it to be on quite the same level since Kath literally goes to the school I went to, etc. But I expected to relate to this character a whole lot in the whole anxiety shyness department. And I will tell you what, we were told that she's shy and anxious many times. I saw it pretty much 0 times. She did not come off as shy to me. I don't want to gatekeep shyness. People experience it differently, but I just didn't see it. There were kind of things that bugged me that kind of felt like they were showing the immatureness of the writing. Like, there are so many silly names for the characters in this book. Our main love interest is named Pilot Pen. Yes, at one point he does say not like the actual writing pen brand, but come on. And there were a lot of names that were like, this sounds like she looked around the room she was sitting in at the time and picked 2 items to make a name out of. There were so many fandom references in this book. I love a good fandom reference. I'm a fan girl, so yes, I enjoy it. But this was just so much, and there were times where the character was making fandom references during like really intense situations in which I just don't think you would be making fandom references. Like, there were serious things going on. Also, she cannot get out of a chair without knocking it over. Like, it became a running joke in the book, and it was something that like her and the main love interest could banter about, but it's just not realistic. There's no way someone's knocking chairs over this much. So just lots of like little silly things like that that just felt ever so slightly too much over the top. And then this book was also kind of actually a bit slow. It felt like there was nothing happening for the first good little while of the book. There's a lot of traveling happening in this book that feels very blah, and like it doesn't add much to the story. Like, we went to the Louvre, that museum, the art museum in Paris, the Louvre, that's how you pronounce it maybe. We went to the Louvre and it was super cool, and that is all. I'll say one of the relatable things was her first kiss. She gets a little tipsy in a bar and kind of makes out with a stranger, and then she has his phone number but just never contacts him again, and I was like, yes, that was my first kiss as well. Shy persons unite, because that feels super relatable as a first kiss for a shy person. Like, you can't be sober for your first kiss if you're as shy as we are. And she was also, as a drunk person, pretty old to be having a first kiss. Very relatable. Her internship was also pretty relatable. Her first day, where she's just sitting there doing nothing and nobody's like giving her any instructions or anything. I definitely had an internship like that, where for the first like week it was just like, what am I doing here? So there were definitely still lots of relatable parts. Just some of it felt slightly over the top, and some of it felt very much like I was being told a lot that she's shy and relatable and not really seeing it. Yeah, as I said, a little bit of a slow start, but there is a big twist in the middle of the book that is not referenced in the synopsis or anything. I had not heard about this thing that happens in the middle that changes the story quite a bit. So if you haven't read it and you don't know much about the story, maybe don't listen to the rest, because I'm going to say what happens in the middle that changes the story. But the first half of the book is very typical contemporary YA novel. And then halfway through the book, this character that has popped up a few times throughout the book, and she's been like, "Are you following me? What's going on? I keep seeing this person around," which should have clued me in. But that person turns out to be her spirit guide, and it turns into a time travel book. Because the first half of the book is her on her study abroad year, in which she's trying to be more outgoing and stuff, and it all sort of falls apart. And so then the second half of the book, it jumps forward in time. She's about to start her career, she's just been proposed to, and her spirit guide shows back up and sends her back to her study abroad year so she can do it again, but better. But it did have a nice kind of a twist on the classic time travel thing, in which it's just one character who goes back and fixes their own life. And this, she and her love interest go back together. So it's kind of nice because it doesn't feel as much like she's manipulating the situation in the past, because her love interest is aware of what's going on. So I think that was a nice twist on the time travel trope. I feel like usually just one person goes back and then kind of just does things differently in order to make the love interest become the love interest. But one thing I didn't like is when she goes back, at first she's only focused on fixing what went wrong with the love interest and is not at all interested in trying to make her dream job happen, which seems silly. Eventually she gets a clue and realizes she should be working towards that goal as well. And then yeah, spoilers again, it all wraps up very happy. Second time around, she gets her dream job, she gets the guy, everything goes great. Which is a nice, typical happy ending for a contemporary YA. I wasn't mad at it. The only thing that kind of bothered me by the end was I realized I wish we'd gotten more out of some of our side characters. Her parents definitely... Cats! Oh, scary. Yes. Hello. Yes. Where was I? Her parents could have been fleshed out better, because when they were like the mean parents who weren't supporting her dreams, I just didn't like them. When they came back together and fixed their relationship, I just didn't really care. And I feel like if the parents had been a little more fleshed out, then maybe I would have cared more. Oh, Harry's really cuddly. You want to be held like a baby, Harry? Harry baby. He kind of smells like kitty litter. Okay, lay on me. There you go. And then also she has a cousin who in the first version of her story, before she time travels, she just sort of loses contact with completely. And then in the second version, there's a point where he messages her and is like, what's going on? It sounds like you and your parents are having trouble. And this time around, instead of just ignoring him, she decides to actually engage with him and try to figure out what's going on with him, because she knows that in the original storyline, he dropped out of college soon after her study abroad stuff fell apart. And so she checks in with him and is like, what's going on with you? And he ends up coming out to her, and she like supports him, sends messages and like it's gonna be okay. But then I feel like we don't really get much beyond that, other than they end up having a close relationship because she messaged him and all that. And I just feel like I would have liked a little more from this character. Again, I feel like I would have cared more if we had seen more of this character. Her friend relationships also are all fairly surface level. I mean, I realize it's just one book and we can't get the life story of all these characters, but some of them I feel like could have been fleshed out just a little more. So yeah, overall, a decent read. Not mad at having read it. There was certainly some relatable stuff, not as much as I had hoped. But the beginning dragged a fair amount. The writing felt somewhat immature throughout. And so I think I'm gonna unhaul this one, even though I did give it 3 stars. But running out of space on the contemporary shelves here. Sadly, my unhauling depends partly what shelf a book belongs in and how many books are already there. And then, as I mentioned, I did read a 4th book this month, and that was The Last Roman Exile. Eric from Break Even Books invited me to be a part of a online book tour for this book. And so I'm not actually going to talk about it too much because last week I posted a dedicated review for this book for the book tour. So please go check that out. Go check out Eric's page. I'll link them both below so you can see more about this little book tour that I was a part of. So yeah, that was the 4 books that I read this month, one being a digital copy. It was so great to reread A Man Called Uva, I wish I had been able to try one of the other Bachmann books. I have not given up on him. I'm going to eventually read Britt Marie Was Here. I really want to try that one. And who knows, I might continue with Beartown. We shall see. And then yeah, Again But Better. Enjoyable enough, but I do think I'll be unhauling. Let me know down below what you've been reading this month. Have you read, unlike me, any spooky books for the month of October? And now on to the quote for today's video, which today I have one from the movie Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. And it goes, "Your life is an occasion. Rise to it." Thanks for watching. Remember, words matter.